The station hung in the darkness like a silver flower, its petals made of metal and glass. Ships from a dozen worlds floated nearby, their hulls painted in colors that meant nothing to human eyes. Elena Vasquez stood at the airlock door and took a deep breath. Behind her, the rest of Earth's delegation waited in silence. "Ready?" asked Marcus, her second in command. Elena nodded. The door opened with a soft hiss. The Galactic Council chamber was beautiful in a way that made Elena's chest ache. The walls curved upward into a dome that showed the stars outside. The representatives sat in a circle, each on furniture shaped for their own bodies. The Velen looked almost like tall rabbits, their fur shifting through shades of blue and purple. The Kresh were insect-like, with too many limbs and eyes that glittered like cut gems. The Thurani were the strangest, beings of light and vapor contained in crystalline shells. A Velen stepped forward. Her fur rippled with welcoming colors. "Ambassador Vasquez, we are pleased to meet humanity at last." "The pleasure is ours, Counselor Thesh," Elena said. She had practiced the pronunciation for weeks. The first hours passed in the usual diplomatic dance. They talked about trade routes and cultural exchanges. They discussed human art and music. The council members asked careful questions about Earth's history, and Elena gave careful answers. Yes, humans had experienced wars. Yes, they had unified their planet only recently. No, they did not claim to be a perfect species. Counselor Thesh seemed to relax as the conversation continued. "You are not so different from us," she said. "We too have known conflict. We too have struggled with our violent impulses. How did you overcome them?" Marcus asked. A Kresh representative spoke, its voice translated into sounds humans could hear. "We learned that violence requires distance from its consequences. When you must look into the eyes of another being as you harm them, when you must hear their pain and see their fear, most sapient minds cannot bear it. We built our peace on proximity. We made it impossible to ignore what violence truly means." Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had read the reports about galactic culture, but hearing it stated so plainly was different. "That's very wise," she said carefully. "It is necessity," the Thurani said. Its voice was like wind chimes. "For 3,000 years, the Council has maintained peace through this understanding. Violence still occurs, but it is rare. Those who can commit harm while facing its reality are too few to threaten our civilization." The conversation drifted to other topics. They discussed human literature and Velen philosophy. They shared meals, though the humans ate from their own supplies. Elena began to think the first contact was going better than anyone had dared hope. Then Thesh mentioned the Ravagers. "They are our one great failure," she said, and her fur darkened to gray. "A nomadic species that raids our outlying colonies. They strike and vanish before we can respond. They care nothing for the peace we have built. Why haven't you stopped them?" Marcus asked. The chamber fell silent. Elena wanted to kick him under the table, but it was too late. A Kresh representative spoke slowly. "We have tried. The problem is not lack of will. The problem is the nature of space combat. To fight in the void requires weapons that kill at great distance. Missiles that travel for hours before reaching their target. Energy beams fired at ships you see only on screens. Kinetic weapons that strike from thousands of kilometers away. And that's difficult for you," Elena said. She was beginning to understand. "It is impossible for most of us," Thesh said. "To kill without proximity, without consequence, without feeling the weight of what we do in the moment we do it. Some of our people can manage it, but the psychological cost is devastating. They return from battle traumatized not by what they saw, but by how easily they could act. The guilt comes later, like a wave that drowns them. We lose more soldiers to their own minds than to enemy fire." The Thurani spoke again. Our military forces are understaffed by necessity. We can defend our core worlds, but the outlying colonies are vulnerable. The Ravagers know this. They exploit our weakness. Elena looked at Marcus. He looked back at her. They both knew what came next. We can help, Elena said. The council members turned to stare at her. Their confusion was obvious, even across species barriers. What do you mean? Thesh asked. Elena chose her words carefully. Humanity has experience with combat at distance. We have fought wars using weapons that kill from far away. We have systems in place to help our soldiers handle the psychological burden. But surely your people must struggle with the same difficulties we face, Akresh said. You are sapient beings with empathy and moral sense. How can you bear to kill without consequence? We do feel it, Elena said, but not always immediately, and not in a way that stops us from functioning during the engagement. The chamber fell silent again. This silence was different from before. It was heavy with sudden understanding and something that might have been fear. You are saying, Thesh said slowly, that humans can kill at distance without immediate psychological collapse. Yes. How is this possible? Elena thought about her answer for a long moment. She thought about drone operators in air-conditioned rooms, about submarine crews launching missiles at cities they would never see, about bomber pilots who flew too high to hear the screams below. She thought about all the ways humanity had learned to function, despite the horror of what they could do. It's not that we don't care, she said finally. It's that we've learned to compartmentalize. We've learned to treat it as a job that needs doing. We've learned to save the guilt and grief for later, when the mission is complete. The Thurani's light flickered. This is a terrible gift you possess. It's not a gift, Elena said. It's damage. It's a scar on our species. But yes, Counselor, we have it. And if the Ravagers are threatening innocent lives, we're willing to use it to help. Thesh's fur had gone completely white. We must discuss this with the full council. This is not a decision we can make quickly. We understand, Elena said. Take all the time you need. As the humans left the chamber, Marcus leaned close to Elena. They're afraid of us now. Yes, Elena said. They should be. 3 months passed before the council gave humanity permission to prove their claims. 3 months of careful negotiations and uncomfortable questions. 3 months of the council trying to find another solution and failing. When the Ravagers struck again, the council finally agreed to let the humans help. The target was a Valern agricultural colony on the edge of council space. 12,000 farmers and their families lived there, growing food in vast hydroponic towers that stretched toward the sky. The Ravagers wanted the food, the equipment, and anything else they could carry away. They didn't care who they had to kill to get it. 3 human ships waited in the sector. The UNSS Vigilant, the UNSS Sentinel, and the UNSS Guardian. Small vessels by galactic standards, barely 200 meters long. The council observers aboard the monitoring station watched them on their screens and wondered if humanity had overestimated their own abilities. Commander Sarah Liu sat in the captain's chair of the Vigilant and studied the tactical display. Red icons showed the Ravager fleet dropping out of faster-than-light travel. 15 ships, heavily armed. The Council Defense Force was scrambling to respond, but everyone knew they would be too slow and too hesitant. All stations report status, Liu said calmly. The responses came quickly. Weapons ready. Shields at full power. Engines running smooth. The crew had drilled for this moment dozens of times. They knew their jobs. Ravager fleet is on approach vector, the sensor officer reported. Estimate 22 minutes until they reach weapons range of the colony. Understood. Helm, bring us to intercept course. Weapons. I want targeting solutions on the lead ships. Communications. Inform the council observers that we are engaging. The Vigilant moved forward. Her sister ships followed in formation. The three human vessels accelerated toward the Ravager fleet like arrows loosed from a bow. Aboard the monitoring station, Counselor Thesh watched her screen with mounting dread. She had insisted on observing this engagement personally. She needed to see what humanity was truly capable of. Beside her, a human liaison officer named James Park stood with his hands clasped behind his back. "Your ships are so small," Thesh said. "How can 3 vessels stop 15? "Watch," Park said simply. The human ships reached weapons range. The Ravagers began to spread out, preparing to surround and overwhelm the defenders. It was a standard tactic. It had worked for them countless times before. Then the humans opened fire. The weapons were kinetic systems, primitive by galactic standards. Metal slugs accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. But the targeting was anything but primitive. The human computers calculated trajectories with inhuman precision. The human gunners made tiny adjustments and fired without hesitation. "Target Alpha 1. Direct hit," a voice said over the com channel. The tone was calm, almost bored. "Good effect on target." On Thesh's screen, one of the Ravager ships broke apart. Atmosphere vented into space. Debris scattered in all directions. The ship had contained 73 living beings moments before. Now it was wreckage. "Target Alpha 2 engaging evasive maneuvers," another voice reported. "Adjusting firing solution." Fox 2. Another Ravager ship died. Then another. The human ships moved through the battlefield like dancers, their weapons firing in precise rhythm. The Ravagers tried to return fire, but the human vessels were faster and more agile than their size suggested. They dodged and weaved, their shields absorbing the few hits that connected. Thesh watched a young woman on one of the camera feeds. She sat at a weapons console, her face illuminated by the glow of her screens. She was 24 years old, according to her file. She had grown up on Earth, studied engineering, and joined the United Nations Space Force 2 years ago. Her name was Officer Rachel Chun. Rachel checked her targeting computer. She verified her orders. She pressed the firing button. A missile launched from the Vigilance hull and streaked toward a Ravager cruiser. The missile's guidance system made tiny corrections as it flew. 42 seconds later, it struck the cruiser's engine section. The ship exploded in a flash of light and heat. Rachel took a sip from her coffee mug. She marked the target as destroyed on her screen. She moved on to the next target. "Target Alpha 5 neutralized," she reported. "Acquiring Alpha 6. Thesh felt her stomach twist. The young woman had just killed dozens of beings. She had watched them die on her screen, and now she was drinking coffee and preparing to kill more. How? Thesh whispered. How can she do this? Park's expression was difficult to read. Training, discipline, and a human brain's ability to treat distant violence as an abstract problem to solve. The battle lasted 18 minutes from first shot to last. When it ended, 12 Ravager ships were destroyed. 3 had fled into faster-than-light travel, damaged and running. Not a single Ravager boarding pod reached the colony. The farmers and their families never even knew how close they had come to disaster that the human crews secured from battle stations. They ran system diagnostics. They filed their reports. Some of them went to eat lunch. Others took naps or read books. A few visited the ship's counselors, but most didn't feel the need. Not yet. Maybe later, when they had time to think. Maybe in a few days or weeks, when the adrenaline wore off and the reality settled in. But for now, they had done their jobs. The mission was complete. Commander Liu transmitted her after-action report to the Council observers. She kept her tone professional and matter-of-fact. 15 enemy ships engaged, 12 destroyed, 3 escaped. 0 friendly casualties. 0 civilian casualties. Ammunition expenditure within acceptable parameters. All systems functioning normally. Crew status green. Thesh requested an immediate meeting with Liu. They met in a conference room aboard the monitoring station. The Velen counselor's fur had gone completely gray, a sign of distress among her people. "Commander, I watched the helmet camera footage from your weapons officers," Thesh said. "I saw them destroy ship after ship. I saw them kill hundreds of Ravagers. And I saw them show no immediate anguish." Liu sat across from her. The commander's face was tired but calm. "What did you expect to see, Counselor?" "I expected to see suffering. I expected to see the psychological collapse that affects our own soldiers when they must kill at distance." "We do suffer," Liu said quietly. "Just not always right away. And we've had a lot of practice not letting it stop us from doing what needs to be done." "But how? How is this possible?" Liu was silent for a moment. She seemed to be choosing her words carefully. "Counselor, when you fight at distance, when you kill people you never see except as icons on a screen, your brain doesn't process it the same way. It feels more like a video game than real combat. The emotions come later, when you have time to think about what you've done. By then, the mission is over. The people you were trying to protect are safe. And your crew can function despite this. Most of them, yes. We have psychological support systems in place. We monitor our people for signs of trauma. Some of them will struggle with what happened today. Some of them will need help. But enough of them will be okay to keep doing the job." Thesh's fur rippled with colors Liu didn't understand. "You speak of this as if it's normal. For us, it is. It's been normal for a very long time." Liu leaned forward. "Counselor, I know this disturbs you. It should. It disturbs us too. But you asked for our help, and we gave it. Those farmers down on that colony are alive because my crew could do something your people can't." "Yes," Thesh said softly, "and that terrifies me more than the Ravagers ever did." Liu nodded slowly. "I understand. But terror and gratitude can exist at the same time. You don't have to like what we are to appreciate what we can do." The meeting ended. Liu returned to her ship. Thesh remained in the conference room, staring at the wall and thinking about what she had witnessed. She thought about Officer Rachel Chun drinking coffee after killing dozens of beings. She thought about the calm voices reporting kills like they were reading grocery lists. She thought about humanity's terrible gift, and she thought about the 12,000 farmers who would sleep safely that night because of what those humans had done. Council chambers were more crowded than Elena had ever seen them. Representatives from every member species had gathered for this emergency session. They all wanted to understand what humanity truly was. They all wanted answers. Elena stood at the center of the circular room, a holographic projector in her hand. Marcus stood beside her with a data tablet. They had prepared for this moment, but that didn't make it any easier. "Honored counselors," Elena began, "you have asked us to explain how humanity developed a capacity for distant violence. We will show you, but I must warn you that some of this material will be disturbing." "Show us," the Therani said. "We must understand." Elena activated the projector. The first image appeared in the air above them. It showed ancient humans with simple weapons, spears and arrows. "This is where it began," Elena said. 50,000 years ago, our ancestors learned to kill from a distance. An arrow could strike prey from 30 meters away. The hunter never had to look into the animal's eyes. It was more efficient than hunting with clubs or bare hands. The image changed. More sophisticated weapons appeared. Crossbows, early firearms, artillery pieces. We kept improving our range. A crossbow could kill from 100 meters. A musket from 200. A cannon could destroy targets a kilometer away. Each innovation made violence easier because the person causing the death was further from its reality. A Velen representative raised a paw. But surely your people must have felt the moral weight of these weapons? Some did, Elena said, but not enough to stop us from building better ones. The images continued. Machine guns, aircraft dropping bombs, naval ships firing at each other from beyond the horizon. The weapons grew larger and more terrible with each slide. By the 20th century, we had industrialized violence. A pilot could drop bombs from 5,000 meters in the air. From that height, the people below looked like insects. Their homes looked like toys. The pilot would release the bombs and fly away. He would never see the fires. He would never hear the screams. Elena's voice remained steady, but her hands were clenched tight around the projector. We had soldiers who fired artillery at coordinates on a map. They never saw the towns they destroyed. We had submarine crews who launched torpedoes at ships on the horizon. They never met the sailors who drowned. The next image showed a control room. Men and women sat at computers, their faces illuminated by screens. This is a drone operations center from the early 21st century, Elena explained. These operators controlled aircraft flying on the other side of the planet. They watched their targets through cameras. They fired missiles at buildings thousands of kilometers away. Then they went home to have dinner with their families. The council chambers were completely silent. Every representative stared at the images with something between horror and fascination. Marcus spoke for the first time. We developed cultural mechanisms to handle this. We created military disciplines that taught soldiers to follow orders without questioning. We built psychological frameworks that let them compartmentalize their actions. We wrote narratives that justified what they did. But surely many of your people broke under this burden, Akresh said. Many did, Elena confirmed. We have entire medical fields dedicated to treating combat trauma. Soldiers who came home and couldn't sleep, who saw the faces of the people they killed in their dreams, who drank themselves to death trying to forget, who ended their own lives because the guilt became unbearable. She changed the image again. This one showed a memorial wall covered in names. These are soldiers who died by their own hands after returning from war. Thousands of names. And this is just one wall in one country. We have hundreds of such memorials. Then how can you continue? Thesh asked. Her fur was shifting through colors of distress. If the cost is so terrible, how can you keep building these weapons? How can you keep fighting these wars? Elena took a deep breath. Because enough of us could function well enough to keep going. Because the people who broke weren't always the ones making decisions. Because we told ourselves that the alternative was worse. Because we developed systems that process soldiers like factory workers, training new ones to replace those who couldn't continue. The images shifted to show more recent history. Space stations, orbital weapons platforms, the early colonial wars that humanity had fought among themselves. When we moved into space, we brought these capabilities with us, Marcus said. We fought wars between Earth and Mars, between the belt colonies and the inner planets. Ships destroyed each other at ranges of hundreds of thousands of kilometers. The crews never saw their enemies except as radar blips. And you learned nothing? The Thurani asked. Its crystalline shell flickered with agitated light. You repeated the same horrors in a new environment? We learned many things, Elena said quietly. We learned that we needed to stop fighting among ourselves. We learned that we needed systems to prevent casual violence. We learned that just because we could kill at distance didn't mean we should. She turned off the projector. The holographic images faded away. For the last 2 centuries, humanity has been trying to build a better civilization. We've created international laws that restrict warfare. We've established psychological screening for military personnel. We've developed ethical frameworks for the use of force. We've done everything we can to make sure this capacity we have isn't used lightly. Elena walked to stand directly in front of Theseus' position. But, Counselor, the capacity still exists. We can't remove it from our psychology. It's part of who we are, built into us by thousands of years of technological development outpacing our moral evolution. We are a species that can kill at distance without immediate psychological collapse. That makes us dangerous. It makes us damaged. And right now, facing the Ravagers, it makes us useful. You speak of this as a deficiency, the Thereni observed. It is a deficiency, Elena said firmly. It's made us more dangerous to ourselves than any external threat ever was. We've killed more humans than any alien species could hope to. Our deadliest enemies have always been other humans. Because we could fight each other without the natural psychological barriers that protect most sapient species from themselves. She turned to address the full council. We've spent 200 years trying to build systems that prevent us from using this capacity casually. We've succeeded in stopping ourselves from destroying each other. But we can't change what we are. We can only choose how we use it. A young Velen representative spoke up. Why did you come to us? Why did you seek contact with the council? Because we needed to, Marcus answered. We needed to be part of something larger than ourselves. We needed the wisdom and perspective of species who never developed our particular damage. We hoped that joining the galactic community would help us become better than we've been. And now you offer to kill for us, Dash said. It wasn't a question. We offered to protect you, Elena corrected gently. The Ravagers threaten innocent lives. You asked us if we could help. We can. We're not proud of why we can help, but we are capable of it. The Thereni spoke again, its voice like distant bells. You understand that if we accept this help, we become complicit in your methods. We become responsible for the deaths you cause on our behalf. Yes, Elena said. We understand that. And you have every right to refuse. You have every right to find another solution. But I have to ask you this, Counselor. How many more colonies will fall while you're looking? How many more farmers and families will die while you search for a solution that doesn't require human involvement? The question hung in the air. No one had an answer. A Kresh representative spoke slowly. You present us with an impossible choice. Accept help from a species that terrifies us, or watch our people die because we cannot overcome our own psychological limitations. I'm sorry, Elena said, and she meant it. I wish we had come to you as something better. I wish we were the wise and peaceful species you hoped to find when you detected our signals. But we are what we are. And right now, what we are might be what you need. The council session lasted for hours after that. Representatives argued and debated. They discussed ethics and necessity. They weighed the cost of accepting human help against the cost of refusing it. Some argued that any species capable of what humans could do should be quarantined, kept away from civilized space. Others argued that humanity's honesty about their flaws was itself a sign of moral progress. In the end, they took a vote. The decision was close. Many representatives abstained, unable to choose between their principles and the practical need for protection. But when the final count came in, the result was clear. The Council would accept humanity's help. They would establish a formal military partnership with strict oversight and clear limitations on human authority. Humanity would provide protection against the Ravagers, but under Council supervision, Elena received the news in her quarters. She sat on her bunk and stared at the wall for a long time. Marcus found her there an hour later. We did it, he said. We're in. Yes, Elena said quietly. We're in. We're the galaxy's attack dogs now. Useful, dangerous, and never entirely safe to have around. Is that how you see us? It's how they see us. And maybe they're right. She looked up at Marcus. "We came out here hoping to be explorers and diplomats. We wanted to be the good guys. Instead, we're the ones who do the killing, because no one else can stomach it." Marcus sat down beside her. "Maybe that's its own kind of nobility. Taking on the burden so others don't have to." "Maybe," Elena said. "Or maybe we're just too broken to know any better." They sat together in silence, thinking about what humanity had become and what they would have to do next. The warning came. 6 weeks after the Council's vote, a Ravager armada was gathering at the edge of known space. Not a raiding party, not a small fleet. An armada. 200 ships, maybe more. The largest force the Ravagers had ever assembled. Their target was the Forge system, the industrial heart of Council space. 70 orbital factories, 50 mining stations, 3 inhabited planets with a combined population of 400,000. If the Forge system fell, the Council's economy would collapse. Their ability to build ships and weapons would be crippled. They would be defenseless. The Council's defense fleet scrambled to respond. Every available ship moved toward the Forge system. But everyone knew it wouldn't be enough. The Council fleet numbered only 43 vessels, and most of those were lightly armed patrol ships. Their crews were brave. The bravery didn't matter when you couldn't bring yourself to pull the trigger. The human fleet received its orders 3 hours after the warning arrived. 27 vessels from Earth, Mars, and the Belt colonies. Frigates, destroyers, and 2 cruisers. They were still small by galactic standards, but they were crewed by people who could do what needed to be done. Commander Liu stood on the bridge of the Vigilant and studied the tactical projection. The Ravager armada showed as a cloud of red icons. The human fleet was a handful of blue points. The odds were not good. "Orders from Fleet Command," the communications officer reported. "We are authorized to engage with full force. Council oversight protocols are suspended due to emergency conditions. All weapons free." Liu nodded slowly. She understood what that meant. The Council was so desperate that they were giving humanity complete tactical authority. They were trusting humans to make the life and death decisions. It was a sign of how afraid they were. "All ships, this is Vigilant Actual," Liu broadcast. "You all know the situation. 200 enemy ships against 27 of ours. The Council fleet will support us, but we're going to carry the main effort. This is what we trained for. This is why they asked us to come out here. Let's show them what humans can do." The fleet moved into position. They spread out in a defensive formation around the Forge system's key installations. The Council ships took positions behind them, ready to provide support fire if they could manage it. Elena watched from the command center on the largest orbital factory. She had insisted on being present for this battle. If humanity was going to fight on behalf of the Council, then someone needed to bear witness. Councilor Thesh stood beside her, along with representatives from a dozen other species. "Your ships are so few," a Kresh representative said nervously. "How can 27 vessels stop 200? "Watch," Elena said. She had said this before. She suspected she would say it many more times. The Ravager armada dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. 200 ships, exactly as the scouts had reported. They began their approach in a massive formation designed to overwhelm. Defenses through sheer numbers, the human fleet opened fire at maximum range. Missiles streaked across the void. Kinetic rounds followed precise trajectories calculated by targeting computers. Energy weapons lanced out from the 2 cruisers, their beams invisible in vacuum, but deadly when they struck their targets. The first wave of missiles reached the Ravager formation. Explosions blossomed in silence. 5 ships died. Then 10, then 20. The Ravagers began evasive maneuvers, but human computers adjusted faster than living pilots could react. Target Bravo 7 destroyed. Officer Chun reported from her station aboard the Vigilant. Her voice was calm and professional. Acquiring Bravo 8. She fired again. Another missile launched. Another ship died. The battle raged for hours. The Ravagers pushed forward, trying to use their numbers to force through the human defensive line. But the humans fought with mechanical efficiency. They rotated their ships to keep fresh crews at the weapon stations. They coordinated their fire to maximum effect. They showed no hesitation and no mercy. The Council ships tried to help. Some of them managed to fire their weapons, their crews pushing through the psychological barriers with desperate determination. But most simply couldn't do it. They watched human ships dart through the battlefield, watched human weapons tear apart enemy vessels, and knew they were witnessing something that no Council species could replicate. Elena stood at the observation window and watched the battle unfold on the tactical displays. Each red icon that disappeared represented a ship full of living beings. Dozens or hundreds of Ravagers dying with each successful hit. She thought about Officer Chun sitting at her console, drinking coffee between missile launches. She thought about all the human crews out there, doing their jobs with practiced efficiency. How many have died? Thesh asked quietly. Her fur had gone pale gray. Alana checked the casualty estimates. Approximately 8,000 Ravagers so far. Maybe more? And your people feel nothing? They feel it, Alana said. But they're trained to save the feelings for later. Right now they're focused on the mission, on protecting those 400,000 civilians who are counting on them. A Ravager cruiser broke through the defensive line. It accelerated toward one of the inhabited planets, clearly intending to carry out its threat to raid and pillage. The UNSS Guardian intercepted it. The human destroyer was a quarter of the cruiser's size, but size didn't matter in the equations of space combat. The Guardian's weapons officer acquired the target, calculated the firing solution, and launched a full spread of missiles. The Ravager cruiser tried to evade. It deployed countermeasures. It fired back at the Guardian, its weapons scoring hits on the destroyer's shields. But the Guardian's crew didn't flinch. They kept firing, kept pressing the attack, kept doing their jobs. The Ravager cruiser exploded. 342 Ravagers died in an instant. The Guardian's shields were at 20%. Her hull had taken damage. But her crew was already running diagnostics and preparing to engage the next target. The battle reached its peak 4 hours after it began. The Ravagers made a final desperate push, throwing everything they had at the human line. For 10 terrible minutes, it looked like they might break through. Human ships took heavy damage. The UNSS Defender was destroyed, all hands lost. The UNSS Sentinel lost main power and drifted out of formation. But the line held. The human crews kept fighting. When their missiles ran low, they switched to kinetic weapons. When their kinetic weapons overheated, they used energy beams. When one weapons station went offline, another crew member took over. They adapted. They persevered. They did what humans had always done when facing impossible odds. They won through sheer, stubborn refusal to quit. The Ravager Armada broke. The surviving ships, barely 60 of them, turned and fled into faster-than-light travel. They left behind 140 wrecks and over 30,000 dead. The human fleet secured the battlefield. They rescued survivors where they could, even enemy survivors. They recovered their own dead from the Defender. They began damage control and repairs. And slowly, very slowly, the enormity of what they had done began to sink in. Commander Liu sat in her quarters and stared at her hands. 30,000 dead. 30,000 beings who had been alive this morning and were now dust and vapor. She had given the orders that killed many of them. She had watched them die on her screens. The grief came now, as it always did. The weight of command. The burden of necessary violence. She would carry it for the rest of her life, along with all the other weights she had accumulated over her career. But she would report for duty tomorrow, and the day after, and every day after that, for as long as she was needed, because that was what humans did. In the command center, Elena and Thesh stood together at the observation window. The battle was over. The Forge system was safe. 400,000 civilians would live to see another day because of what the human fleet had done. "I don't know what to say," Tesh said softly. "Thank you seems inadequate." "You don't have to thank us," Elena said. "This is the agreement we made. Protection in exchange for a place in your civilization. But the cost, the psychological burden your people must bear." Elena was quiet for a long moment. Outside the window, human ships moved among the wreckage, their running lights like small stars in the darkness. She thought about Commander Liu and Officer Chen and all the others who had fought today. She thought about the counseling sessions they would need, the nightmares some of them would have, the scars this battle would leave on their minds. "Commander Liu told me something once," Elena said. "She said we do it because someone has to, and we're the ones who can. That doesn't make it noble. It doesn't make it good. It's just what we are. The galaxy's guard dog," Thesh said, remembering Elena's words from before. "Useful, dangerous, and never entirely safe to have around." "Yes, and you accept this role?" Elena turned to look at the Valoran counselor. "We accept it because the alternative is watching people die when we could have saved them. We accept it because our damage can serve a purpose. We accept it because maybe, just maybe, protecting others will help heal some of what's broken in us." She looked back out at the human ships. "You'll have to decide if having us around is worth the cost, counselor. You'll have to decide if you can live with keeping predators on a leash and hoping they never turn on you. That's your burden to bear. And what is your burden?" Elena smiled sadly. "Ours is knowing that we are those predators. Knowing that we can kill at distance without feeling it in the moment. Knowing that we're useful precisely because we're damaged. And trying every day to make sure that what we are serves something better than ourselves." They stood together in silence, human and alien, watching the aftermath of humanity's terrible victory. The stars shone cold and distant beyond the window, separated from them by kilometers of empty space. And Elena thought about distance, about how it made everything easier to bear, and everything harder to truly understand. She touched the glass. It felt solid and real beneath her fingers. She wished the distance between action and consequence could feel this solid, this real, this impossible to ignore. But she was human. And for her species, distance had always been both a weapon and a curse. The galaxy would have to decide if they could live with that. And humanity would have to prove they deserved the chance.